Well, good morning. This is the Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe Jaquint, the man that's been opening this show for a great many years now, is taking a well-deserved vacation. He's going to see all his brothers in one place at one time for the first time in years, and no funny story about him being in Cuba or something today. He already told you guys where he is. He's taking some time off. I'm obviously taking he had planned this months ahead. He told me months ahead. He's like, look, Jason, I'm going to be off for a week, start getting ready for some shows. I have the hour of the Patriot Radio News Hour plus the 2 hours of the Half Empty Cup of Joe to start preparing for. So I started preparing for it, up to 2 months ago, really. But especially 6 weeks ago, I started really, figuring out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to do on the Gold Show. And I've got something that I'm going to play for the entire week. It's a piece called A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind. It's by Stephen Mitford Goodson. Mysteriously had a heart attack in 2018, but he put this out in paper form, and the gentleman that picked this up, which is anonymous as far as I'm concerned. I don't even believe the name of the guy that says he's narrating this, but he really loved this understanding of how central banking got started throughout history, and he covers a lot of ground. It's a little bit dry. There's a ton of information. So a lot of times people ask, when we say they are doing this to us, it's always they, right? Well, this will give you quite a few of the they that you're asking about. I'm going to play it all through the week. I'll take some breaks and discuss what we're talking about. I am going to have a gold and silver special, which I'm going to do right now because gold was kind of just sitting there as I was getting the gold special ready, and it's moving. Suddenly gold is moving. I'm going to keep the specials at the price they are today, but don't think that this is a price that's going to stay put very long. I don't know where gold and silver will go with the events that happened Saturday. The thing that happened on Saturday, the Donald Trump incident, we will cover that in spades on the Half Empty Cup of Joe from 10 a.m. to noon Colorado time. If you're in Arizona and want to hear maybe a different perspective than all the chatter that's going on, then go to 1360khnc.com at 10 a.m. Mountain Time to listen in, because I have Glenn Biddle coming on. Steve Mitchell, unfortunately, is in Hawaii and couldn't physically do the show. And we'll probably open the phones up pretty quick, and we'll let everybody talk about it. But I'm going to stick to the. I prepared these shows weeks ago before what happened on Saturday, so I'm going to stick with this. The gold and silver specials, I'm going to talk about it right now, and then I'm going to re-hit it later in the show. We have some gold and we have some silver. Our bread and butter stuff. We have a $20 gold pieces for $2,595. $20 gold pieces, and this is before gold. Let me check up to the minute. It was going up, like coming into the show, it was going up. It just keeps going up. It's up $24.37. Before I came on the air about 15 minutes ago, it was only up about $12, and about an hour before that, it was only up about $3 or $4. So it's currently moving. I put the special together. We'll stick with this today and then see where gold ends up later today and by tomorrow morning. But $20 gold pieces for $2,595. The last time there was a Trump incident that was crazy, the January 6th, I've never seen so many customers fly in the doors. So I don't know if this will spark gold or not. I don't know. But it's starting to move right now. Silver's up 30 cents. I have Silver Eagles at $760. If you go to the website, Joe's on vacation. He's not setting up the specials at the website, but you can see the regular price coming into today versus what the price is for today's special. 800-951-0592. That is where you call. The girls are ready to take your orders. 800-951-0592. And buy yourself some gold and silver. Joe just he's pushing it. The year of chaos. Well, he's probably chomping at the bit. Even though he's on vacation, he'd probably love to be on the air for this day. But he'll be back next week. I don't know. He may call during the show and want to jump in. I don't know. It's live radio, so I'll roll with it. But I'm going to stick with what I prepared for the Gold Show. And I'll stick to the geopolitical and the political and all the craziness from the weekend. That'll start at 10 a.m. on the Half Empty Cup of Joe. I got about a minute here. I'm going to start the clip. So once again, this is it's a pretty long. It's like 3.5 hours of material. So obviously, I'm not going to get that on with the commercial breaks and everything. I'm not going to even play the entirety of it for the entire week. But I got some really good shows on the Half Empty Cup of Joe planned, and this information ends up mending beautifully in with some of the shows I'm doing this week. So if you can handle some of the information, if you need to come back and look at the podcasts afterwards to really understand the information, then come back to it, because there's a lot here. I'm a little worried because I started preparing this about this stuff I started preparing about a month ago. And my first 2 sources for this video were taken off the internet, and so I'm still finding sources. It's not impossible to find, but it's interesting. I didn't think the material was that strong, but there is some stuff in there that is not popularly understood. So that's why I think you guys will like it. Once again, it's called A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind. It's written by Stephen Mitford Goodson. I think you guys will like it. I'll start on the next segment, and enjoy. If you really want to know more about central banking, how it started, why assassinations happen, well, these pieces are full of that stuff. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. Welcome back, the Patriot Radio News Hour. Let's get right into it. The history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind. Enjoy if you really want to know how the world is run, why it is the way it is today. There's a lot of information here, but as the days go on, as I keep playing this thing, I think you're gonna learn a whole lot. So here we go.
A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. Chapter 1. How Usury Destroyed the Roman Empire. Money, being naturally barren, to make it breed money is preposterous and a perversion from the end of its institution, which was only to serve the purpose of exchange and not of increase. Men called bankers we shall hate, for they enrich themselves while doing nothing. Aristotle, Politics. The monetary systems of the Roman era, 753 BC to 565 AD, may be divided into 3 distinct periods, where units of 3 different metals were used as the means of exchanging goods and services. Although there is evidence of modern human occupation, Homo sapiens sapiens, in the Rome area going back 14,000 years, with Neanderthals having lived there approximately 140,000 years ago, Rome as a city is traditionally said to have been founded by Romulus and Remus in 753 BC in a region surrounding the Palatine Hills, also known as Latium. According to the legend, Romulus, who killed his brother Remus, became its first king, but later shared the throne with Titus Tatius, the ruler of the Sabines. Around 600 BC, Latium came under the control of the Etruscans. This lasted until the last king, Tarquin the Proud, was expelled in 509 BC and the Roman Republic was established. The Etruscans, a people of Aryan origin, created one of the most advanced civilizations of that period and built roads, temples, and numerous public buildings in Rome. The first money used in Rome was the cow. This was not true money, but a barter system. Many early peoples used cattle as a medium of exchange. According to the legend of Heracles in the Aegean stables, the cattle kept there, over 3,000 in number, represented the treasury of King Aegeus. The Copper Age, 753 to 267 BC. As time went on, the Romans took to using, instead of cattle, irregular lumps of copper or bronze. These lumps were called ius rude, rough metal, and had to be weighed for each transaction. There was an increase in trade, and Rome became one of the most prosperous cities in the ancient world. This prosperity was based on uncoined copper, later bronze, metal which was measured by weight according to a fixed system of units. It was issued by the Roman treasury in the form of ingots weighing 3.5 pounds, 1.6 kilograms, with the full backing of the state, and was known as ius signatum, stamped metal, because it was stamped by the government with a cow, eagle, or elephant or other image. Sometimes they were made to resemble a scallop shell. In 289 BC, these ingots were replaced by discoidal, cast-leaded bronze coins, ius grave, heavy metal. They represented national money and were paid into circulation by the state, and each was only of value inasmuch as the symbols on which its numbers were recorded were scarce or otherwise. This money was thus based on law rather than the metallic content, although that content was standardized and the coin did have some intrinsic value, unlike most coins today. This can be considered as an early example of the successful use of fiat money. While fiat money is much criticized in some quarters, for example by the followers of Austrian economist against counterfeiters. Non-fiat money, in contrast, has the serious drawback that whoever sets the prices of gold and silver, i.e. private bankers, can control the nation's economy. Up to 300 BC, there was an unsurpassed increase in public and private wealth of the Romans. This may be measured in the gain of land. After the conclusion of the Second Latin War in 338 BC and the defeat of the Etruscans, the Roman Republic increased in size from 2,135 square miles, 5,525 square kilometers, to 10,350 square miles, 26,805 square kilometers, or 20% of peninsular Italy. In tandem with the expansion of its land area, the population rose from about 750,000 to 1 million, with 150,000 persons living in Rome itself. A partnership was formed between the Senate and the people known as Senatus Populusque Romanus, SPQR, the Senate and people of Rome. The political leaders were renowned for their frugality and honest virtue. The means of exchange was strictly regulated in accordance with the increase in population and trade, and there was zero inflation. Debt bondage nexum, whereby a free man offered his services as security for a loan plus interest, and where in cases of non-payment the debt had to be worked off, was abolished after plebeian agitation by the Lex Potelia in 326 BC. The Silver Age, 267 to 27 BC. The traditional money system was destroyed in 267 BC when the patrician elite attained the privilege to mint silver coinage. This change was typified by a patrician who went to the temple of Juno Moneta, from which the word money is derived, and converted a sack full of silver denarii to 5 times its original value by the simple expedient of stamping a new value on the coins. He thus pocketed a very substantial difference in seigniorage for his own private account. The early Roman silver coin was known as the drachma, and was modeled on a coin used in the Greek south of the peninsula. It was later replaced with the smaller and lighter denarius. There was also a half denarius, called the quinarius, and a quarter unit called the sestertius. Still later, the system was supplemented with the victoriatus, somewhat lighter than the denarius and probably intended to facilitate trade with Rome's Greek neighbors. There were very few deposits of silver in the Italian peninsula, and as a consequence the Roman army had to be expanded in order to conquer territories to obtain supplies. The Roman peasants, who had provided the Republic with food independence, were drafted in increasing numbers into the army. Agricultural production, especially corn, declined, and the peasant farms were replaced by latifundia, which were large estates worked by slaves. Wheat also had to be imported from North Africa. Tensions about granting citizenship and enfranchisement between Rome and her Italic allies resulted in the Social War from 90 to 89 BC. This lack of enfranchisement had led to the fragmentation of Roman society and the alienation of the working-class citizens, who were treated as chattel and who had no responsibilities and therefore no commitment towards the state. Until as late as the Second Punic War, from 218 to 201 BC, they were not allowed to serve in the army. This was a classic example of a society which had been monetarized. The Republic was weakened and there was increasing despotism. Piracy became a major problem, with raids taking place on the coast, villas being sacked, and travelers kidnapped. Violence became endemic and gangsters and terrorists were active in Rome, as there was no police force to maintain law and order. These are inevitable consequences of a society in which money had become the highest ethos. There was also political intrigue amongst the elite. Economic deprivation caused discontent amongst the poor, who were increasingly slaves from North Africa, and social unrest. This turmoil culminated in the revolt led by Spartacus in 73 to 71 BC. The first and second revolts were in 135 to 132 BC and in 104 to 100 BC. The Jewish role in the collapse. The first known Jews who arrived in Rome in 161 BC were Yehuda and Maccabee. These early Roman Jews employed themselves as craftsmen, peddlers, and shopkeepers. In the last occupation, they also indulged in money lending. As a community, they lived separately in apartments. They governed themselves according to their own laws and were exempt from military service. In 139 BC, the Jews, who were not Roman citizens, were expelled by Praetor Hispanus for proselytizing, but they soon returned. In 19 AD, by means of a Senatus Consultum, Emperor Tiberius expelled 4,000 Jews who had been involved in various scandals, but none of these expulsions was properly enforced, and their continued presence, in particular as usurers, would play a significant role in the decline and collapse of the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, 100 to 44 BC, was born into an aristocratic family on July 12, 100 BC. He was tall and fair-headed and practiced briefly as a lawyer before becoming a brilliant military commander who conquered Gaul, France, in 59 to 52 BC. After his defeat of Pompey the Great in 48 BC at Pharsalus, Caesar became the undisputed leader of the Roman Republic. On his return to Italy in September 45 BC, Caesar found the streets and cities crowded with homeless people who had been forced off the land by usurers and land monopolists. 300,000 people had to be fed daily at the public granary. Usury was flourishing with disastrous consequences. The principal usurers, many of whom were Jewish, were charging interest rates as high as 48% per annum. As Lucius Annaeus Seneca, 4 BC to 65 AD, the philosopher, would later remark in De Superstitione, the customs of that most criminal nation have gained such strength that they have now been received in all lands. The conquered have given laws to the conqueror. At that time there were two main political parties, the optimates, centered around the nobility, the Senate and the privileged few, and the populares, who represented the citizens. Caesar immediately assumed leadership of the latter. Caesar fully understood the evils of usury and how to counter them. He recognized the profound truth that money is a national agent, created by law for a national purpose, and that no classes of men should withhold it from circulation so as to cause panics, in order that speculators could advance the rates of interest, or could buy up property at ruinous prices after such panic. Caesar introduced the following social reforms. 1. Restoration of property was done at the much lower valuations which held prior to the Civil War, 49 to 45 BC. 2. Several remissions of rents were granted. 3. Large numbers of poor citizens and discharged veterans were settled on allotments. 4. Free housing was provided to 80,000 impoverished families. 5. Soldiers' pay was increased from 123 to 225 denarii. 6. The corn dole was regulated. 7. Provincial communities were enfranchised. 8. Confusion in the calendar was removed by fixing it at 365 1/4 days from 1st of January 44 BC. His monetary reforms were as follows. 1. State debt levels were immediately reduced by 25%. 2. Control of the mint was transferred from the patricians, usurers, to government. 3. Cheap metal coins were issued as the means of exchange. 4. It was ruled that interest could not be levied at more than 1% per month. 5. It was decreed that interest could not be charged on interest, and that the total interest charge could never exceed the capital loaned, the in duplum rule. 6. Slavery was abolished as a means of settling debt. 7. Aristocrats were forced to employ their capital and not hoard it. These measures enraged the aristocrats and plutocrats whose livelihood was now severely restricted.
Just going to come in and add, so if you're listening, Caesar's got a negative connotation when you learn history. But according to this, as you're listening, he was a leader of the people, which sounds different than what we've learned in a lot of ways. And he kicked the bankers out and started running a non-centrally banked system in his country. So let's listen on and see what happens.
They therefore conspired to murder Caesar, the hero of the people. On that fateful morning of the 15th of March, 44 BC, only 4 years after assuming power, he arrived at the Senate building unarmed, having dismissed his military guard, who had previously been in constant attendance. Surrounded by 60 conspirators, he was stabbed to death and received 23 wounds. The Gold Age, 27 BC to 476 AD. In 27 BC, shortly after Caesar's death and his deification, the Romans adopted the gold standard, which would have far-reaching implications for the financial stability of the empire and lead directly to its demise. Previously, during the days of the Roman Republic, gold coins were issued only in times of great need, such as during the Second Punic War or the campaign of Lucius Cornelius Sulla. There were very few gold mines in Europe, except in remote places like Wales, Transylvania, and Spain, and therefore most of the supplies could only be secured from the east. This in turn required a large and expensive army, which became engaged in constant conflict at the empire's fringes. The gold coin was known as an aureus. Also in circulation were the silver denarius and the copper coins, the sestertius, dupondius, and the as. The scarcity of gold or commodity money frequently induced periods of deflation as a result of the lack of a circulating means of exchange. In 13 BC, a measure of relief was provided when the weight of the gold aureus was reduced from 122 to 72 grains, and this remained the standard weight until 310 AD. However, metals continued to flow eastwards in order to pay for luxury items, religious dues, and usury payments. Furthermore, wear and tear resulted in the loss of 1/3 of total coinage in circulation over a 100-year period. As gold was treated as a commodity, its debasement was not tolerated. Emperor Constantine, 275 to 337 AD, personally ordered death for counterfeiting and the burning of public minters who committed falsification. Money changers who did not report a counterfeit gold bezant, solidus, were immediately flogged, enslaved, and exiled. These regulations were effective for the bezant, which weighed 70 grains and was slightly more than the bezant which was still circulating in 1025 AD and weighed 68 grains. In 313 AD, Christianity was tolerated by the Edict of Milan, and from 380 AD was established as the official religion by Emperor Theodosius I, from 347 to 395 AD. From this time, monetary power resided in the religious authority of the Pontifex Maximus. A feature of the imperial era was social injustice and the undermining of the middle classes through excessive taxation. The Roman businessman was not a trader, but a looter of the provinces, as the homeland had a weak industrial production base, which was incapable of providing the required manufactured goods. As the monetarization of...
So you're getting a pretty good idea of the Roman Empire, and going through this, one of the first cycles of dealing with central banking, and there's a couple more minutes of this, but I'm going to move more to the origins of more how the modern central banking system occurred, starting with the next segment. But even gold was used against the people. It's not the same situation we have nowadays. The reason that you buy gold and silver is to help yourself not become one of these slaves or peasants. 800-951-0592. $20 gold pieces, $25.95. Silver Eagle, $760. Welcome back to Patriot Radio News Hour, 800-951-0592. Get your gold and silver special today. Gold just continuing to move. Let me get the update on the prices. You never know when this thing just starts jumping. So still have gold up about $23.70 at $2,434. We closed Thursday the first time over $2,400, and Friday the second time over $2,400. We're going to close at a record high today. Very apparently, silver's up 16 cents, sitting right at $31 to the ounce. We have Silver Eagles at $760 a roll. Get them, stack them, buy them, and get ready for the next few months and the next couple of years, because the fear machine is cranking out now. We got, like I said, the $20 gold pieces for $25.95. It's a great way to jump in on some gold, and Silver Eagles at $760. 800-951-0592. I'm going to continue on with a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind. This is Chapter 2. This is done. This was written out by Stephen Mitford Goodson. The narrator is anonymous. He really wanted this information to get out in a form that people could hear, and it's several of my sources of this has actually disappeared recently, just in the time I've been doing this. So I'm downloading a copy of it, so I don't lose it if it gets erased off the internet. But this is Chapter 2: The Hidden Origins of the Bank of England.
A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. Chapter 2: The Hidden Origins of the Bank of England. All great events have been distorted, most of the important causes concealed. If the history of England is ever written by one who has the knowledge and the courage, the world would be astonished. Benjamin Disraeli, Prime Minister of Great Britain. Ancient England.
By the way, the guy just said your history is fake, but let's continue.
Offa ruled the Kingdom of Mercia, which was bounded by the rivers Trent and Mersey in the north, the Thames Valley in the south, Wales in the west, and East Anglia and Essex in the east, from 757 to 791 AD. It was one of the 7 autonomous kingdoms of the Anglo-Saxon Heptarchy. Offa was a wise and able administrator and a kind-hearted leader. He established the first monetary system in England. On account of the scarcity of gold, he used silver for coinage and as a store of wealth. The standard unit of exchange was a pound of silver divided into 240 pennies. The pennies were stamped with a star, Old English stara, from which the word sterling is derived. In 787, King Offa introduced a statute prohibiting usury, viz., the charging of interest on money lent, a concept which dates back to the pagan era. The laws against usury were further entrenched by King Alfred, 865 to 899, who directed that the property of usurers be forfeited, while in 1050, Edward the Confessor, 1042 to 1066, decreed not only forfeiture, but that a usurer be declared an outlaw and be banished for life. First Jewish migration and expulsion. The Jews first arrived in England in 1066 in the wake of William I's defeat of King Harold II at Hastings on the 14th of October. These Jews came from Rouen, 75 miles, 121 kilometers, from Falaise in Normandy, where William the Conqueror was born illegitimately as William the Bastard. Although the historical record does not indicate whether they promoted the idea of a military invasion of England, these Jews had at the very least financed it. For this support, they were richly rewarded by being allowed to practice usury under royal protection. The consequences for the English people were disastrous. By charging rates of interest of 33% per annum on lands mortgaged by nobles and 300% per annum on tools of trade or chattels pledged by workmen, within 2 generations, 1/4 of all English lands were in the hands of Jewish usurers. At his death in 1186, Aaron of Lincoln was declared to be the richest man in England, and it was estimated that his wealth exceeded that of King Henry II. Furthermore, the Jewish immigrants undermined the ethos of the guilds and exasperated the English merchants by selling a large variety of goods under one roof. They also played a prominent role in the clipping of silver coins and the melting of them into bullion and the plating of tin with silver. The famous economist, Dr. William Cunningham, compares the activity of the Jews in England from the 11th century onward to a sponge, which sucks up all the wealth of the land and thereby hinders all economic development. Interesting, too, is the proof that even at this early period, the government did everything in its power to make the Jews take up decent trades and honest work, and thereby, at the same time, amalgamate with the rest of the population, but all to no purpose. By the beginning of the 13th century, many nobles were in danger of losing their lands through usury and taxation. In 1207, an enormous sum of £60,000 was levied in taxes on the Christian population. The Jews also paid tax, but at a lower rate and on grossly understated income and wealth. Nobles who borrowed from Jewish moneylenders and from the king and his agents had to have their mortgages registered on the treasury rolls. As soon as a noble got into financial difficulty, the king would buy the debt from the moneylender and seize the land for himself. King John, 1199 to 1216, was utterly reckless in pursuit of this depraved and dishonest policy, and was moreover profligate, incompetent, and utterly beholden to his Jews. In 1215, the nobles revolted and forced King John to sign the Magna Carta on the 15th of June, 1215. This document consists of 61 clauses relating to the establishment of various constitutional and legal rights, but its principal purpose was to cancel the bonds of the Jewish moneylenders and to abolish usury and the privileged position of the Jews. On the 19th of October, 1216, King John died and was succeeded by his 9-year-old son Henry III, who ruled from 1219 to 1272. His reign was little better than that of his father, and 19 of the clauses affecting the Jews were abrogated the following year. However, his heir, Edward I, from 1272 to 1307, soon realized that Jews had no place in English society, and that if he did not take action, he would be in danger of losing his throne. In 1233 and 1275, statutes of Jewry were passed which abolished all forms of usury. As many of these Jews could no longer earn a living, a statute was passed by King Edward on the 18th of July 1290, compelling the entire Jewish population of 16,511 to leave England forever, one of over 100 expulsions which have been recorded throughout European history. The announcement was greeted with great joy and jubilation throughout the land.
Something I want to point out to what he just said there and make it very clear. He's saying that this is something historically that has happened 100 times. You could say that it's anti-Semitic, but there are 100 times in our past history in which this group of individuals, they call them Jews, they might as well just call them groups of parasites that just want to take advantage of a country. It's not saying that this is a race of people, because he's talking about the Jews that go into the country and do this. So I'm not going to make a lot of excuses. I think the information is actually very good. But I just want to point out that 100 times in history countries have been doing this. You would think that there's some wisdom to it if it's happening over and over again to protect the finances of your country.
Like the modern practice of ethnic cleansing, the Jews, after paying a tax of 1/15 of the value of their movables and 1/10 of their specie, were permitted to leave with all their goods and chattels. Any Jew who remained after the 1st of November 1290, All Saints' Day, was liable to be executed.
Halloween, by the way.
The glorious Middle Ages. With the banishment of the moneylenders and the abolition of usury, taxes were moderate and there was no state debt, as the interest-free tally stick was used for government expenditures. This ancient instrument of finance, known to the Saracens and possibly also to the Chinese, is derived from the Latin word talia, meaning a stick. A tally...
I want to back that up a little bit, because the tally stick is one hell of a good way to run a monetary system. and was very successful for England before the bankers came back. We'll have more of this when we get back. Stay with us. You're listening to the Patriot Radio News Hour. Welcome back. We're doing a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. Let's just jump back into it. We're talking about those tally sticks. It's a honest form of money that was successful for 100 years in England.
Of 1/15 of the value of their movables and 1/10 of their specie were permitted to leave with all their goods and chattels. Any Jew who remained after the 1st of November 1290, All Saints' Day, was liable to be executed. The glorious Middle Ages. With the banishment of the moneylenders and the abolition of usury, taxes were moderate and there was no state debt, as the interest-free tally stick was used for government expenditures. This ancient instrument of finance, known to the Saracens and possibly also to the Chinese, is derived from the Latin word talia, meaning a stick. A tally stick was made out of hazel, willow, or boxwood because these woods split easily. They were usually 8 inches in length, 20.3 centimeters, from forefinger to thumb, and half an inch, 1.3 centimeters wide, although they could be up to 8 feet, 2.44 meters long. The denominations were indicated by different sized cuts in the wood. 1,000 pounds were marked by cutting out the thickness of the palm of a hand, 100 pounds by the breadth of the little finger, 1 pound that of a swelling barley corn, shillings somewhat less, and pence were marked by incisions. The payee was recorded on the flat sides. When all the details had been recorded on the tally, it was split nearly to the bottom so that one part retained a stump or handle on which a hole could be bored. This was known as the counter-tally or counterfoil and was held on a rod at the exchequer. The flat strip, without the stump, was given to the payee. As no two pieces of wood are identical, it was impossible to forge a tally stick. Tally sticks were first introduced during the reign of King Henry II from 1100 to 35 AD and would remain in circulation until 1783. It was, however, during the period of 1290 to 1485 that tallies would reach their apogee and constitute the principal means of state finance. Tallies were used not only to pay state salaries, but to finance major items of infrastructure, such as construction of the Wall of the City of London and public buildings and ports. The exact amount of tallies in circulation is not known, but as late as 1694, 17 million pounds worth were still in existence. This was a prodigious sum, as the king's annual budget rarely exceeded 2.5 million pounds, and a laborer earned a penny a day. With tolerable taxes, no state debt, and no interest to pay, England enjoyed a period of unparalleled growth and prosperity. The average laborer worked only 14 weeks and enjoyed 160 to 180 holidays. According to Lord William Leverhulme, a writer of that time, the men of the 15th century were very well paid. In fact, so well paid that the purchasing power of their wages and their standard of living would only be exceeded in the late 19th century. A laborer could provide for all the necessities his family required. They were well clothed in good woolen cloth and had plenty of meat and bread. Houston Stewart Chamberlain, the Anglo-German philosopher, confirms these living conditions in his The Foundations of the 19th Century. In the 13th century, when the Teutonic races began to build their new world, the agriculturalist over nearly the whole of Europe was a freer man, with a more assured existence than he is today. Copyhold was the rule, so that England, for example, today a seat of landlordism, was even in the 15th century almost entirely in the hands of thousands of farmers, who were not only legal owners of their land, but possessed in addition far-reaching free rights to common pastures and woodlands. During their spare hours, many craftsmen volunteered their skills in building some of England's magnificent cathedrals, which reinforces one of the basic tenets of Western civilization that, without leisure time, the fostering of culture is not possible. George Macaulay Trevelyan, the English social historian, describes these accomplishments as follows. The continuous but ever-moving tradition of ecclesiastical architecture still proceeded on its majestic way, filling England with towering forests of masonry of which the beauty and grandeur have never been rivaled either by the ancients or the moderns. In the newer churches, the light no longer crept but flooded in through the stained glass, of which the secret is today even more completely lost than the magic of the architecture. Although King Henry VIII, 1509 to 1547, relaxed the laws regarding usury in 1509, they were subsequently repealed by his son, King Edward VI, 1547 to 1553, by an act of 1552, whose preamble stated that usury is by word of God utterly prohibited as a vice most odious and detestable. End of a golden era. During the 17th century, this golden era came to a tragic end. Large numbers of Jews, who had been expelled from Spain in 1492 by Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon on account of their persistent involvement in usury and unethical business practices, had settled in Holland, Although the Dutch were at that time an important maritime power, the Jewish usurers based in Amsterdam desired to return to England, where their prospects for expanding the operations of their money-lending empire were far more promising. During the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, 1558 to 1603, small numbers of Marranos, Spanish Jews who had converted to a sham form of Christianity, settled in London. Many of them practiced as goldsmiths, accepting deposits of gold for safekeeping, and then issuing 10 times the amount of gold received as gold receipts, that is, loans with interest. These receipts, a forerunner of the fraudulent fractional reserve system of banking, were initially lent to the Crown or Treasury at 8% per annum, but according to Samuel Pepys, the diarist and secretary to the Admiralty, the interest rate increased to as much as 20% and even 30% per annum. The rate of interest merchants paid often exceeded 33% per annum, even though the legal rate was only 6% per annum. Workmen and poor people bore the brunt of these extortionate rates of interest by having to pay 60%, 70%, or even 80% per annum. According to Michael Godfrey, the author of a pamphlet entitled A Short Account of the Bank of England, 2 to 3 million pounds had been lost through the bankruptcies of goldsmiths and the disappearance of their clerks. Cromwell in the English Civil War. In 1534, by the Act of Supremacy, the Church of England was established as the official religion of England by King Henry VIII. During the 16th and 17th centuries, Puritan beliefs based on the teachings of John Wycliffe and John Calvin gained an increasing number of adherents. The Puritans considered the Bible to be the true law of God and emphasized Bible reading, prayer, and preaching, and the simplification of the ritual of the sacraments. The Stuart King Charles I, 1625 to 1649, who wished to maintain the preeminence of the Anglican Church, came into intensified conflict with the Puritans, who were making great progress in proselytizing the population. After the assassination of Charles's trusted friend and advisor, the Duke of Buckingham in 1628, he gradually became more isolated. The growing religious division provided a perfect opportunity for exploitation by the Jewish conspirators. As Isaac Disraeli, the father of Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, wrote in The Life and Reign of Charles I, the nation was artfully divided into Sabbatarians and Sabbath breakers. In 1640, one of the leaders of the clandestine Jewish community, Fernandez Carvajal, a merchant and spy, who was also known as the Great Jew, organized an armed militia of about 10,000 operatives who were...
We'll talk a little bit about this on the last segment. I'll retouch that gold special and silver special. We're in part 2 of the a history of the central banking and the enslavement of mankind. I'm going to be playing this most of the week. There's a lot of ground to cover, a lot of information, but you're going to hear a lot of things that if you listen to this show and you understand gold and silver, that sound very familiar. 800-951-0592. We'll be right back. The Patriot Radio News Hour, the number to call to buy gold and silver, 800-951-0592. And let's take a look here at the gold prices. Gold's still up about $23. It's at $24.34 an ounce. Silver's still sitting there right around $31 an ounce. We got gold and silver specials today. A $20 Liberty at $2,595. Buy one, buy 10. I'm with the gold going up essentially $15 an ounce since I got on the air. I'm going to keep the price the same instead of having a volume discount because very quickly gold is getting more expensive. A $20 Liberty at $2,595. If you'd like some Silver Eagles today, I got Silver Eagles at $760 per roll. If you go to allamericangold.com and shop the prices, you'll see that I've dropped the prices from our regular price. Joe usually is the one that handles the pricing day to day, and instead of he's going to change the prices daily, but when I come on the air and have a special, I'll if it's something that's a typical item, I'll just knock the price down with whatever item I can get my hands on. And today, that's those $20 Liberties and those rolls of Silver Eagles, 800-951-0592. And we're doing a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. We got a couple of minutes before we get off the air here. I'll say this: if you're wanting to listen to some wide open radio, it's going to be next hour. If you're in Arizona or listening to this online, go to 1360khnc.com. You can flip over there to the half-empty cup of Joe. Glenn Biddle's supposed to be my guest. Well, I'm pretty sure he's coming on. You never know when these guys, something happens. But Steve Mitchell is usually my Monday guy, but he's in Hawaii, so he's unable to be on the show today. But we'll have the phone lines open, I'm sure, pretty early, and there'll be lots of stuff to discuss. If you got anything you want to talk about with the happenings over the weekend, it's going to be there, and I'm sure it'll be should be kind of fun, actually. There's going to be no loss of numbers of opinions of what's going on leading up to our November election this year. So there is that. So I'm gonna get another minute or two of this in, because, like I said, there's a lot of material to cover throughout the week for this, because it's a long piece, and I've already gotten 4 texts for people that want to know where to find this. Right now, you can find it at YouTube. Type in a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind. There are several guys out there that keep reloading it as it gets knocked off. So I think it should still be there for a while, but I'm going to try to download a copy of it so that in the future I'll have it if it gets wiped off. I don't think it's inflammatory enough to be wiped off completely, or else I would have had to find this on BitChute or Rumble. The fact that it's even existing on YouTube shows that it's there's not a whole lot of naysayers that can prove this information wrong. So I think it's good information if you can sit by and then listen. And you can always go to 1360khnc.com. You can go to the Patriot Radio News Hour podcast to re-listen to what I've played. Same thing with the Half Empty Cup of Joe. But let's play to finish off. Let's do another minute or two, and then I'll see you on the other side of the break for the Half Empty Cup of Joe.
And Sabbath breakers. In 1640, one of the leaders of the clandestine Jewish community, Fernandez Carvajal, a merchant.
You know what? We're hitting the end of the show. It's things move fast when you play a lot of content. I'll just do one more time. I don't foresee gold and silver going down a lot, and I don't know what details and fear is going to be in the news cycle, which tends to push the gold price. So right now, today, you can get $20 gold pieces for $2,595. You can get the rolls of Silver Eagles for $760. Thanks for listening in. I'll be here tomorrow. We'll play more of this, and enjoy the rest of your day.